you got me on a good night, Nick, because I'm fired up about a couple different things, which we are going to get into throughout the course of the show.
That happened in this game?
Well, one thing that happened in this game,
okay.
The other stuff happened in another game, which I think the people who are jumping in live with us, the people who are listening to this later, I think it's kind of one of those situations, Nick, where I feel like we're starting the show with a purpose of, hey, let's react to the Ohio State game, but we know what everybody really wants to talk about. It's like kicks versus berry kicks. Yeah, kicks is cool. Your mom used to buy it for you because it was a healthier cereal. But I really wanted the berry kicks. It was better. It had more flavor. It was fruitier. I liked it. So we all know what people want us to talk about. We're going to get there at some point in the show. I think that's kind of the gist of this one tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's impossible to tell the tale of this game tonight without just continuing to say every nice superlative you can about Marvin Harrison Jr. He got them going really early. Kyle McCord, and we got to really give him his flowers today because he was really good, really early, and really confident. But Marvin Harrison Jr. with 3 touchdowns on the day, it was 168 all-purpose yards. And in fairness, he kind of can gripe a little bit with his quarterback because his quarterback caused him to miss his 4th touchdown with kind of an underthrow. But like, for me, this is the kind of game where, like, because Marvin had a couple clunkers early in the season, he needed a game or two to kind of beef up those stats. Well, today was that kind of day. And I think the fact that he had pretty much most of this coming in the first half and that, he spent most of the second half on the sidelines, I think is something to pay attention to. And today, I'll be honest with you, there were 2 names that I saw, people in the college football stratosphere, whether it is, us in the media or college football fans tweeting about. One was Jaden Daniels of LSU, who had a ridiculous day on the ground. He had 200-plus yards running, plus another like 150 yards passing. And then the other name was Marvin Harrison Jr. And it really just it sets up really neatly for that Ohio State-Michigan game. And it sets up for a Heisman push here as you move into Minnesota this next week. And I don't know you can say anything more about Marvin Harrison Jr. other than that was a holy crap kind of performance out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought the fact that they used him. I mean, how many times have we on this show, Nick, talked about how the way Ohio State is going to win games is with their defense stopping the opponent and giving the offense more opportunities. And then with those opportunities, Ohio State getting the ball in the hands of their athletes in advantageous situations, whether it's Trayvon Henderson, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. And Ryan Day did that today in more than just the passing game. I mean, the first touchdown he scored of the day was on the ground. Like, they used him in a reverse situation and he was able to score that way. So I thought that was a brilliant move by them to sort of try some of these things out, test some of these things out for that maybe you'll have or want to deploy against better teams like Michigan or in a college football playoff situation. So I love that about this game. But yeah, you're right. Kyle McCord kind of cost him a 4th touchdown there. But as you bring up the Marvin Harrison Jr. for Heisman conversation, I kind of want to credit our show for getting the ball rolling on this, because we had this conversation weeks ago and we went in and I even did as much as crunching the numbers on where he was stacked up with Devonta Smith from a couple of years ago when he won it. And I'm at a point right now, Nick, as I look at the numbers, he's over 1,000 yards receiving now. He's up to, I think, 12 total touchdowns now on receiving touchdowns. He does have the one obviously on the ground tonight, so 13 total. He is right in the realm of where Devonta Smith was a couple years ago. I'm just going to put it on the record now. I'm going to say it on this show. If Ohio State beats Michigan and Marvin Harrison has a good game in that one to help them beat Michigan, I think he is going to win the Heisman Trophy. I think it has to go to him because, yeah, like you bring up Jaden Daniels and, yeah, he's had a good year and all these different things. But are the voters really going to give it to somebody on a team that isn't going to the college football playoff or doesn't really have a shot at that? Like, they're going to give it to somebody who is a key contributor on a team that is going places. And Ohio State would obviously be on that track if they beat Michigan in 2 weeks.
I think the reason why the Michigan game is more important for him, I think it's less about beating them and it's more about him in that game showcasing his value to this team. and with a big offensive performance. And I think like tonight's a kind of night where like if you didn't have Marvin, you're still probably going to win 38-3,
Yeah.
but you're going to have to earn those points a little tougher. Ibuka still isn't where where you want him to be. He's still battling the ankle injury, which Gus Johnson said about 75 times in the game today. Cade Stover's a really nice piece, but obviously he's not either Ibuka or Marvin Harrison Jr. You're still kind of getting intermittent production from the other guys. So I just think like Marvin Harrison Jr. is the single greatest whoopee for a quarterback and for a shaky quarterback like Kyle McCord that we've ever seen. And we do have a comment already from the listening masses here. Buckeye Brown saying, way to go, Buckeyes. That was honestly after a hard-fought victory against Rutgers. I'm not entirely sure what to expect out of Minnesota because they've had like the fluky Iowa win and then turned around with a bad loss and then another bad loss today to Illinois. So like part of me wants to say you might just get another kind of freebie walk into the end zone next week. But getting back to Marvin Harrison Jr., today was his 14th 100-yard plus receiving game in his career. That ties him with Buckeye legend David Boston for the most of all time. You would imagine he's going to have a chance in the regular season here with 2 more games to go.
And then
to make that record his own.
Didn't he also pass he passed Chris Carter tonight, right? For touchdowns, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So to me, the way this is stacking up, if he can have another game, and now I'm sounding such a spoiled brat, but from the Heisman side of things, I think today put him in the top 3. I think he's been gearing that way, but I think if he can have another kind of similar output against Minnesota, where you're just seeing a guy that he's just making it easy for everybody else around him. Travion Henderson only had to run the ball 13 times today, compared to 46 times total in his first 2 games back off the injury. So you're saving Travion a little bit of tread there. Man, if he can go out there against Michigan and just have couple touchdowns, 150 yards, even if you don't win, but it's a close game, I think everyone's going to walk away seeing what we saw tonight, where this dude is just on a different level than pretty much everybody on the field at any given point.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we kind of viewed, Nick, like this stretch of games where you have Rutgers, where you have Michigan State, where you had Minnesota next week. We sort of looked at this as the stretch where he needed, because when we talked about the Marvin Harrison conversation earlier, we did sort of note that he's a little bit probably off the pace to make the award his. And we kind of said this stretch of games before the Michigan game was kind of his chance to pad those stats to get himself more into that conversation. And then the Michigan game really is like the last audition. This is your chance. Like if you go out and you perform in this one and Ohio State wins the game, like it's yours, man. You can't give it to anybody else, because that to me would prove like he had the biggest impact on the team, that probably had some that wasn't necessarily the Ohio State we're used to in previous years, where they're just lighting everybody up. And like kind of what we saw tonight, that's usually the week to week thing with Ohio State. So for him to sort of take them to that next level and be the reason why they maybe beat a Michigan and go into the college football playoff and stay undefeated, like it would be the cherry on top of his resume for the award. I think you'd have no choice but to give it to him, in my opinion. So I think you're right. Like he was already trending that direction, but tonight and the last couple of weeks in general, I think have kind of cemented him as the top 3 candidate. And I think that it's going to come down to what happens in that Michigan game. And that's how, and to be fair, like that's how that's how this Heisman conversation usually happens, right? Like you need, with all the players that win the Heisman, you can usually find a moment and say that was their Heisman moment. Like you think maybe the classic example of that is like Johnny Manziel, which I know brings up PTSD for us living in Cleveland, but Johnny Manziel, the year he won it, his Heisman moment was that drive against Alabama to go down and win the game. Like you have these moments where you're like, okay, this guy's clearly it. And that moment for him is going to come in Michigan. And if he lives up to it, if it helps Ohio State win that game, then yeah, I think it's his award. I think it's his award to lose. I really do.
Well, and I got to say, I really like the idea of using that wrinkle of him in the run game. And they used it a lot with Xavier Johnson as well tonight, which again, I think was a lot about saving touches on on Travion
Henderson.
Henderson.
I'm going to be
But
honest, Nick. That was when they went down and they scored. Harrison scored the rushing touchdown. I was like, okay, cool. They scored the second touchdown, the pass to Harrison, and it was 14-0. And my first thought was, okay, how many more scores do they need before they can start taking guys like Henderson out, like Harrison out?
yeah.
Because I did not want anybody to get hurt. That was literally my thought after that second touchdown.
Yeah. But I mean, I think if you can find a way to specialize it or to highlight that once or twice, I think that could, that's the kind of wrinkle that if you can abuse that in the Michigan game, and he just pops one off from the backfield, and he has a very similar to the way it did, his first touchdown tonight. I think that'd be huge. Now, another comment coming in here, and I actually think this is a legitimate conversation to have today, which is about Ohio State and just gunning it early and then kind of pulling their foot off here. Chuck tuning in here, giving us his comments here. You guys can please join along as well. Chuck saying, any issue with Ohio State not continuing to pour it on and then going conservative with the backups? I don't, but just had an argument with someone saying that we needed the style points. All right, so I think this is a legitimate conversation. What I would say is I don't have an issue with it. I think it's a classy thing to do for an embattled coach in Harlan Barnett, who's obviously trying to get the full-time gig. They're not going to give it to him. So he's just trying to get that team to the finish line. And I actually think Michigan State should have that the kids on the field should have earned your respect tonight, because they were outgunned, outmanned. They had that first Marvin Harrison catch was on a freshman corner, left one-on-one on an island, because they just don't have the dudes. So I'll be honest with you. I think if this was a different team, or if Ryan Day maybe had more of an axe to grind, if this was Michigan instead of Michigan State, maybe it'd look different. But I think this was I actually think it was the classy thing to do. And because listen, if the committee paid any attention to this game, they're going to see that this game was over at halftime, and you're going to be able to know that the Buckeyes pretty much called off the dogs there early in the third quarter.
Yeah, I generally understand, like, this is always the debate, Nick, because in the college football playoff era, where it's all based off of this, arbitrary conversations with with people on the committee and how they feel about things, you generally want the style points in that way. So I generally and that's why these people who get mad nowadays about oh, well, why do they keep pouring it on, or why they run up the score? I usually don't get mad about that like some people do, because I'm always like, well, in today's climate, if you're a good team, you kind of want to prove that you're the better team. And so you just kind of keep doing it. And my argument will always be like, well, stop them if you don't like it. Right. But in this instance, I agree with you. I think the spread is always a good indicator, right? If you're covering the spread, that's usually a pretty good indicator of and the spread in this game was what, 31.5, I think, coming in, right? Am I right about that? 31.5. Yeah. If you're covering the spread as early in the game as Ohio State was, I don't think the committee is going to dock you because you didn't decide hey, you know what, let's try to double the spread on this team. I think you pretty much proved, yeah, we're good. We beat this team. Now, maybe the one way it comes back to bite you is that you look across the scoreboard and see Georgia hung 45 on Ole Miss, who was ranked 10 in the country. And so maybe then you're like, well, I guess you could have run up the score, but I don't think it's two completely different games. Yeah. I think at this point, if you're Ohio State, you've already established the committee that you're a good team. They've given you number one the last 2 weeks. I don't think you were going to add to your argument or add to your case by trying to double up the spread on a team like Michigan State. I don't think it does any Ohio State any benefit.
I do think there's one potential way we could look at this. And I don't know how much this matters because you and I are not in the selection committee room, but I could conceivably see this conversation happening. Oh yeah, 38-3, that's a really nice win. Michigan beat them 49-0. And when we start to add up all the little stuff, Michigan literally beat Penn State in Happy Valley by one more point than Ohio State beat Penn State in Columbus.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, it might not have been. It might have been a different score had James Franklin not decided to go for it on 4th and 1 from his own 30 or whatever the hell it was, like,
We'll
so
save that. But I do wonder, like, whether those things matter. But if Ryan Day, looked at this and said, "Yeah, I could probably score another 35 points if I wanted to, or 38 points, but I don't want to get anyone injured, and there's no need in demoralizing a school that's already so demoralized they're putting Hitler on the scoreboard on at
that's how
random
you know you
games."
reached rock bottom.
Yeah, that Hitler's usually a lot of people's, rock bottom, if we're being fair about it. Yeah, not a lot of people came away from association with
No.
that guy with a positive tale and good career outlook. But I think it might matter, but I this is one of those times where I just don't mind you taking the
Yeah.
the the classier route